Hey everyone, my name is Kristen Lehman. I'm with Hewitt Learning and the Independent Innovator Challenge, and I have the wonderful opportunity to talk with you today about how do you unlock your child's creativity. So first, a little bit about myself. Like I said, my name is Kristen. I'm the Director of Educational Services at Hewitt. I also was a program director for Invent Washington and a couple other programs throughout the years. One of the things I've done is helped found the Independent Innovator Challenge, which is a pathway for any student across the US who doesn't have another program to go through to be able to earn a spot at the National Innovation Challenge every year. So Hewitt, the organization I work with, is a nonprofit designed to create educational resources for homeschool students. It can be curriculum, programs, testing. We do a lot of everything. My point today and my focus today is really creativity and how do we bring that creativity home and how do we set up an environment at home so our kids learn how to be creative. We're going to explore the value of it first. Why is it important? Why do we want to teach this? Why do we want to incorporate this into our already busy lives? And then once we talk about the importance, I want to go ahead and look at some practical ways that you can really start teaching this the moment you turn this video off, to be able to go and start teaching those practical ideas of this is how you learn creativity. So let's take a moment to talk about creativity first. What is creativity? It's that outside of the box thinking. It's the being able to come up with new ideas. There's a lot that goes into creativity, and NASA a few years ago did a study on creativity. They surveyed 100 5-year-olds and discovered that 98% of those 5-year-olds qualified as creative geniuses. They found this fascinating and said, you know what, let's keep going with this. Let's see what happens a couple years down the road. And so a couple years later, they did the same kids, same study, and found that we were down to 30% of 10-year-olds were considered creative geniuses. Again, found this fascinating and said, let's just keep going with this. At 15, we were down to 12% of those same were creative geniuses. And then as adults, a whopping 2% were creative geniuses. This was fascinating enough that many people have actually tried recreating the study and found the same thing, that creativity is not something that is learned. It is something that is actually inherent in who we are as human beings and gets taught out of us through life experiences, through educational opportunities or lack of opportunities. It's something that we learn to forget. Now, the encouraging thing about that is it's like riding a bicycle. You know how to do it. It's just something that we've had trained out of us, whether it's a curriculum that was too focused on right and wrong. Now, there is a time and place for right and wrong, obviously, but there is also a time for being able to think outside the box and being able to think creatively. And so, how do we bring these opportunities into the home? How do we create an environment where kids can learn the correct answer for subjects, but also hang on to that creative genius that 5-year-olds are so good at? As homeschool parents, we really want what's best for our kids. We live in a world where there's information coming at us, and we want our kids to be able to filter through that information and say, I need to be a critical thinker. I need to think through is this feasible? Is it probable? All these different things. We want our kids to be problem solvers, to have good imaginations, to be critical thinkers. On top of all of that, in the workforce, there's actually a long-term trend away from routine-oriented work. The Industrial Revolution, we were all assembly line, chunk, chunk, chunk. And in today's world, that's not what most employers are looking for. We're looking for creativity-oriented, where people can engage in analysis and make judgment calls, being able to create new things, to be able to solve problems 10 years from now that don't even exist today. So how do we prepare ourselves? How do we prepare our kids for a world that doesn't yet exist, for problems that haven't yet been created? How do we train them to be creative problem solvers? One of the ways to do that is to focus on innovation. there are innovation and invention programs out there, like the Independent Innovator Challenge. There's invention conventions, different things like that out there. And being able to take kids through that innovation process is one way that you can teach creativity and innovation at home. There's really four main pillars for a good innovative idea. The first thing is you want it to solve a problem. There's a ton of problems out there. So how do you pick one? How do you narrow it down? That being said, sometimes kids aren't the most observant in the world. They are in their own world, they know their problems, but they don't necessarily know the problems of the bigger picture. And so how do you help them find solvable problems? So the first thing is a good innovation will solve a problem. The next one is it needs to be a novel idea, original. No one else has thought of it. And along those lines, it needs to be non-obvious. Most of the time, kids are like, oh yeah, I got this great idea. And it's like, oh yeah, 50 people have already done that. So that new creative idea that's not the obvious one, that's the hallmark of a really good innovation. And the final step is it needs to have value, not just for the person who's innovating it, but for other people as well. So how do we work our kids through this process of finding a problem, making sure it's original, making sure that it's not the most obvious solution, but it is still doable. We still want it to be doable. And then finally making sure it has value to other people as well. The innovation process is a great way to go about it. Kids a lot of times will say, hey, I'm no good at math. I'm no good at science. I don't like it. I'm no good at reading. Whatever it happens to be, they usually by late elementary school will be coming and saying, I'm no good at blank. One of the things I love so much about teaching innovation and creativity is it takes all of those preconceived notions away. It says, okay, fine, you think you're no good at reading. Fine, you think you're no good at math. Great, let's just explore. Let's dive into these different pieces. And then as we go, I as a parent or teacher can then say, hey, did you know you were really good at this? Did you know you were doing this? And because they're doing things that they want to do, that they are engaged in, their ideas that they are coming up with, it's a motivating factor to dive into the math or the science or the reading that they might have a hang up otherwise. Innovation and invention programs are a great way to be able to bring kids into some of those subjects that might be a little tougher for them. The innovation and invention process starts with identifying a problem. What's wrong? Then you've got to understand the problem, the details of it. Ideating is kind of that fancy way of saying, let's come up with ideas on how to solve it. The design cycle is one where you hang out for quite a while, making mistakes and looping back through and saying, let's test this. Does it work? Oh, this part worked, but this part didn't. Loop back through, try it again, test it. Let's tweak this and try again. Great way to be able to teach those problem-solving skills. And then finally communicating that the solution, the design process all the way through. I want to take a closer look at each of these steps today. So, but as we're doing this, one of the tools that I found really helpful is a journal or a logbook along the way. Some kids will have an idea that they can actually take and patent, make money, have an invention. If they're going to have if they're going to be able to patent an idea, then having proof that this idea is theirs when they come up with it, dated, this is my process, this is what I did, that portfolio, that journal is a great way to prove that this was their idea. Now, not all kids are going to take an idea to the patent office and sell their invention. I would still highly suggest a journal along the way. Several reasons. If you need record keeping, if you're in an area where you're reporting and need a portfolio, it's a great addition to the year's portfolio of work. But more importantly, it's a great way for kids to be able to track their own process. A lot of times, we get scared of the big F. We're scared of failing. We're scared of being branded, oh, I made a mistake. Oh, this happened. And that journal, tracking what you've done, where the mistakes were, how you fixed them, and then at the end, be able to end up with a final idea that actually worked through all the mistakes, takes that stigma off of that red failure. And it changes it from the F, the fail, to first attempt in learning. FAIL. It's just a first attempt. It's just going to try again. Now, some kids might need a little extra push to be able to jump in and really feel it's okay to make mistakes. One of my favorite activities is a mystery bag. You can put whatever you want in there as long as it's things that have been invented by mistake. And there's a whole list. There's silly putty, Slinkies, Play-Doh. The pacemaker, the implantable pacemaker, was an invention that came about by someone's mistake. So obviously you can't put a pacemaker in a paper bag, but if you get things like Post-it notes, Play-Doh, Slinky, chocolate chips, and put them in a paper bag and just say, hey, what do these have in common? And make them think through, brainstorm, oh, well, this one's sticky, maybe it's this one is, oh, they're not all edible, maybe they'll come up with all sorts of ideas, but really the key that holds them all together is every single one of those things was invented by mistake. My favorite one is the chocolate chip cookie. Someone at the Toll House Inn was trying to bake cookies for their inn customers, and they were wanting to make chocolate cookies and were out of baking chocolate. And so she thought, okay, I'm out of baking chocolate, but I can just chop up this chocolate bar and it'll melt and blend together and I'll have my chocolate cookies. Well, what happened? It melted, but not blended throughout, and she accidentally created chocolate chip cookies. Took it to Nestle and got a deal where she could, Toll House cookies. That was where they came from. The first chocolate chip cookie was a mistake that somebody made trying something new. And so there's a lot of ways that you can bring those examples into everyday life. Point out that mistakes can bring good things. And just enjoy while you're baking cookies. Point out that the only reason they exist is because someone made a mistake. Another thing you can do is journal and come up with a good quote. And one of the things I do with my kids all the time when they make a mistake is I go, good. And they look at me, wait, you're happy I made a mistake? I say, yes, I'm very happy you made a mistake because it means you are learning. If you never made a mistake, then you wouldn't be learning. It's impossible to learn without making mistakes along the way. And now you don't want it to always be making mistakes. You want to be able to learn from those mistakes and make different mistakes along the path. But it's a good thing to be able to have the freedom to trip up, to be able to make mistakes. And so to have a quote like this one where it says, I hope you make mistakes, and have them journal about it. How does it make you feel to have somebody tell this to you? There's a lot of journals that you can do that talk about that mistake making. The journal really is a great way to be able to capture that process of making mistakes and what you've learned from them and the growth from the making of mistakes. If you do want to go on and participate in an invention or innovation challenge or competition, then often they have you organize the logbook. And you can do that in a lot of different ways depending on the program you're with. But it's still that same design cycle. You got to start by brainstorming the ideas. You've got to research. You've got to narrow down the massive amounts of ideas you might have to the one you want to work on. Come up with how explain how you came up with your final solution, and find a way to communicate why this is so valuable to people outside of your circles. Analysis and market analysis is also a good piece as well. I want to focus in on the first two to start with, the identifying and understanding. A lot of kids say, I don't know how to come up with an idea. Where do I start? They are so entrenched in their world. Their nose is in a book, or they're in their Minecraft world, or whatever it may happen to be, that they don't necessarily see everything that's going on. One activity that I really enjoy doing is, what is this? It's easy to do. Grab something that's laying around. I happen to grab a pen. It's a pretty common one for me. And I say, what is it? And they go, it's a pen. Okay, great. What else is it? Let's think together. What else could it be? Oh, it's a head scratcher. Oh, what else could it be? Oh, it's a ramp for ants. Okay, it's a projectile. Inevitably, if I'm working with a group of elementary school students, I end up with somebody going, it's a nose picker. So the sky's the limit, and it gives them the freedom that they're not tied to one right answer in this circumstance. You can do it with anything. You can do it standing in line in the grocery store. You can do it driving to a soccer practice, wherever you happen to be. You can just grab something and say, hey, what is this? And see what they come up with. Another idea that you can do on the go is, what's wrong with this? Okay, what's wrong with this? Oh, this is really flimsy and it always breaks off. Oh, this part, it gets too noisy, or the ink doesn't write very well. And you start listing all the things that are wrong with this pen. Another thing is, what bugs you? Let's look around. Write a list of everything that bugs you. Oh, my sister bugs me. Fine. Let's narrow it down. Non-people. What bugs you that's not a person? And you begin to open up that idea of, it's okay to find problems. Our world is not perfect. And you can't solve the problems if you don't see them in the first place. So let's brainstorm and just write down everything that bugs you. Once they have this whole list of everything that bugs them, then they can pick and say, oh, this is the one that really interests me. I want to go into this one. And that's when they can go into the research. What solutions exist to this problem? Who else has the problem? There's a lot of research that can be done. And so this innovation education can be really cross-curricular and teach writing, because the logbook, journaling, it can teach research, communication, and then once you get down to the design cycle, there's all sorts of math and science that get involved in there as well. Some kids need a little bit more structure. They need a little bit more than just being able to pick up a pen and say, what is this? For those kids, and for everybody, Scamper is a great option. Scamper stands for substitute, combine, adjust, magnify, minify, or modify. P is put to other uses. E is eliminate. And R is rearrange or reverse. One of the things that if you, in the swag bag for the VIP pass, there's a downloadable worksheet for this. I'll show it real quickly here for you. But there is Scamper is a great option because it can be done with anything. One of my favorite ways to do it is with a whisk, like this one right here. Just that little whisk. Grab it from your kitchen and say, okay, what can I change on here? What can I combine this with? What happens if I blow it up real big? What happens if I shrink it down real small? What happens if I do this? And let them do each of those pieces and come up. Some of the ideas are going to be really pointless. Others are going to be, oh, that's interesting. They don't have to be feasible. They can involve aliens. They can involve zombies. They can involve whatever you want. It's a chance for them to be able to think outside the box and say, let's take this simple whisk and make it into something new. If you want to put it into an assignment and have them actually write it out, you can do something like this where they say, okay, substitute. Here's my idea for substitute. Combine. Here's my idea for combine, and be able to lay it out that way. So you can do it in a very structured way. My favorite adaptation, Scamper, somebody had the brilliant idea to just kind of cut the tongs off a whisk, and we get those little head scratchers that are so fun. So these ideas where people have scampered things are out there all over the place. Another variation you can do on this is in the grocery store, if you're going grocery shopping, is point out all the times people have used this concept for marketing. Paper clips. What can I do with this? Let's grow it big. Let's change the size. Let's change the shape. Snickers bars. What else can I do with this? There's all sorts of things you can, for kids who like to start a collection, say you can start a collection as long as every item is subtly different. Let's look and see how it's changed. So there's all sorts of things you can do with that. Another fun thing you can do with this, if they get really into it, is you can have them create a marketing report and say, okay, you've come up with this idea. Instead of a whisk, now I've got a hanging basket for flowers. How would I market this? How would I create a video and pitch my idea to the world? How would I create a commercial? What would I sell it for? What would the costs be? Here's our math coming in. What would the cost of this be? How can it be used right now? All sorts of things that you can do to be able to expand on this idea. And this is something that kids this summer can do. You just hand them a whisk and say, here, go create. And you have a couple moments while they do that, and then see what they come up with for their commercials or whatever it happens to be. All right. So the next steps in the designs, or in the flow, are ideating and design. And this is one of the fun parts. This is where kids love. The other ones, sometimes they need a little motivation. They need these activities like the brainstorming to get them going. A lot of kids are natural. They love this design phase, but they get bogged down. So one activity is reverse engineering. It's a way to be able to take things and learn how to analyze the structure, the function, all sorts of things. A take apart is a fun thing for kids. You can buy the little, McDonald's toys, or you can an appliance, or you can go to a used secondhand store and get an old toy. Whatever you want to do, you can have something that's been lying around your house forever and say, take it apart. But first, this is what you have to do first. You have to take it apart in a logical way. You have to take a moment to think through what you think it looks like inside. How do you think, before you open it up, how do you think it works? So they can draw a picture, they can write a description, something that has them pause, slow down a little bit, and say, this is what I see. I think it does, I know it does this. I think this is what's causing it. Scientific method coming into play. Come up with a hypothesis, test your theory. Come up with a plan for taking it apart. For some kids, this is the first time they're using tools. So this is one that, depending on the level of your kids, some of these kids, you can just hand it to them and go. Other kids might need a little bit more one-on-one instruction, a little bit more help. But it's a great way to be able to introduce new tools, new names, new vocabulary as you go. It's also good to the fine motor skills of being able to get in there. They might come across not just tools, but parts that they don't know the purpose of. And so it's that great way to be able to teach exploration and diving in, that curiosity of, oh, what is this? How does this work? Why does it work this way? Lots of questions that you can do with that. It's, as they're taking it apart, one of the things that's really good is to have little sticky notes and just kind of organize it as they go. Some kids are really organized, do that naturally, lay it out, say this is the part here, this is the part here. Other kids just, it's a chaos. But the challenge is, when they're done, can you put it back together? And so that's the piece that you want. Some kids, you tell them that ahead of time. Other kids, you give them that, the challenge, you let them take it apart and go, oh, now can you put it back together? So it's kind of, you know your kid the best, which route you take. After you take it apart, there's a lot of questions you can ask as well. Why is it made of this particular part? Why do they use metal? Why do they use plastic? How could you use this in your invention? So this, once they have an idea of something they want to solve, a problem they want to solve, and they're starting to come up with solutions, sometimes it's good to throw these activities in there and say, let's pause for a moment on your invention. Let's look at how other people have done theirs. Let's take this apart. see how it's done, put it back together, and then take those ideas and adapt them to solve our problem. It is very challenging to be able to put them back together. I would not expect kids to be able to put these back together. But the challenge of doing it will help them keep track of the parts and kind of train them that it is, it's good to track what you're doing throughout the process. We've done a lot. If you need a moment to pause the video and jot some ideas down of things that you can do, how you want to adapt this to your home situation, feel free to pause the video and jot a couple notes. I wanted to give a quick moment here. And then we're going to jump in to the design cycle. A lot of kids, STEM is the field where they feel the most inadequate. They have a hiccup on math. They have a hiccup on whatever. And so that's why this design cycle, the testing something, building it, testing it again, redoing it, as they're doing it, you can point out all the things that they're good at. Hey, did you know you're so good at engineering? Did you know that you were so good at designing new plans? Did you know that you're so good at testing theories? Whatever it happens to be, it's a great pausing point, this area, to be able to find areas of strength for your kids. And it may not be the ones that they expected or that you expected. So it's a fun thing to do along the way. Another fun activity that I've done with my kids that I absolutely love is nuclear waste removal. And you can do this however you want to frame it. If you've got kids that are sensitive to the world, we've got a lot of different things. You can adapt it to however you want. But what I do is I have a Ziploc bag and I grab things from around the house. It can be popsicle sticks, it can be straws, clay, paper clips, rubber bands. You've got a list here. Not too much. I usually do, the stuff that's listed here fits into a gallon-sized Ziploc. I've done it with as small as a quart-sized Ziploc. You just kind of adapt it to what you have on hand. And then you give them the challenge using only what I give you, nothing else. You have to create an apparatus, some sort of tool, to be able to remove marbles, nuclear waste in this scenario, without touching it. And in fact, your body has to stay at least, pick the distance, at least a foot, some kids 3 feet, at least a foot away from the marble at all times. You have to contain the marble. So that it's very adaptable. You can say contain it, you can say move it, however you want to do it. But the crux of this activity is using only the supplies in this bag. I want you to do something with this marble. I've had kids take a whole hour on this, just exploring, being able to, do the straws together, or clips or whatever, to be able to get in there and loop the marble and be able to carry it or contain the marble so it doesn't roll, however you want to do it. I would suggest no tape, no glue, nothing that is too sticky. Clay works well as a substitute if you have it, but it's not critical. And so this is a fun one for the summer, just to say, hey, go out to the back porch or go to the kitchen table and take this bag, and I'm going to give you 20 minutes. And I want you to see if you can move the marble from this side of the table to that side of the table, keeping your body at least a foot away from the marble at all times. It's a whole challenge. It's a design thinking that gets them thinking in a new way. Once they've done that, you can modify the constraints however you want. You can use bigger marbles, smaller marbles, use the same supplies and do it with a baseball instead of a marble. That one might be a little hard. So just make sure that it's semi-feasible. You can also use things besides marbles. Slime is a great way to go. Contain water, good outside activity using only these materials. So there's a lot of adaptation you can do. It's a really flexible activity that you can do that teaches that design thinking. And once they come up with that solution, again, you can say, hey, market your idea. And again, this gets them thinking about, okay, I've got this idea. I've got the thinking of why I think it's the best option, but now I need to communicate why I think it's so good to others. So you're crossing curriculums again, you're getting a little bit of language arts, you're getting a little bit of science, you're getting a little bit of everything just by saying, hey, create a TV ad for your idea, or give me a 5-minute pitch on why your idea is better than my idea. Get in there and make it a family competition. Dad and sister with mom and son, whoever comes up with the best idea wins. So there's all sorts of variations you can do to fit your family. The final piece is really one that goes all the way through. And that's one that some kids struggle with. How do I communicate along the way? And that's where that logbook a lot of times comes into play, is keeping track of my ideas. The marketing reports, being able to create a 3-minute pitch video is a good route to go. If you're going to enter a challenge or a competition, the Independent Innovator Challenge, there's invention conventions, then oftentimes you're having to create a pitch video. Usually it's a couple minutes long. And so how do you condense all of this different stuff down to one thing? It's another way to be able to have them have to think outside the box in a creative way, to be able to condense all their ideas into a way that somebody else will understand in 3 minutes. So there's a lot of different things that you can take and adapt throughout the whole process. If you are interested, I'll just add it here, the Independent Innovator Challenge opens up January 1st every year, and registration always closes on World Creativity and Innovation Day on April 21st every year. But this is something that you can do throughout the year, whether you enter a challenge or not. You can add these activities to just kind of your everyday life and adding them as you go. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out. I get access to all the emails that come through the Independent Innovator site or from the Hewitt Learning site. Either way, you can reach out to me and ask me questions directly, or yeah. So it was a pleasure talking with you all, and I hope that you are now inspired to go out and do some creativity and innovation with your kids. Have a good day.